I had smiled too long through invisible pain. "We don't need old men like you." But she had no idea who built the floor she was standing on. They cut out experience for fresh perspectives and nearly gutted a company in the process. I walked out with every glance was a verdict, and I always lost box and a clause they never read, then came back owning everything they abandoned. "We need hungrier talent who can meet higher targets," Brian explained, while sliding the termination papers across the polished conference table. "The company is moving in, as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome new direction. My name's Darren McCabe, 46 years old, 9 years as senior account executive at Triana Corp in Kansas City, Missouri. I'd spent nearly a decade building a client portfolio that accounted for almost 40% of the company's revenue. Every glance was a verdict, and I always lost. No shortcuts, just long days, constant travel, and relationships built on trust." I smiled, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out without argument. Brian Ellsworth had arrived 6 months ago as our new vice president of sales, brought in, as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome, by the CEO to reinvigorate the team. He wore custom suits, spoke in tired motivational phrases, and had never once joined me on a client call. 3 weeks after starting, he'd implemented a new commission structure that slashed my earnings. I had smiled too long through invisible pain, by 20%, despite my numbers being consistently strong. The signs were there. My desk had been moved to a corner during office renovations. My name disappeared from meeting invites. Yesterday I'd noticed it servicing my computer while I was as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome lunch. Small things not worth mentioning, but enough to know something was coming. I packed 9 years into a single cardboard box, family photos, a coffee mug my daughter had painted, and a folder of client contact information I'd kept. I had smiled too long through invisible pain, separate from the company database. Just habit, really. "Need help with that?" asked Valerie from accounting. She looked genuinely confused. "Are you changing offices? Something like that?" I replied, not wanting to make a scene. On the elevator ride down in that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed. I stood next to Everett Stanton, our CEO. He nodded without really seeing me, too focused on his phone. He had no idea what Brian had just done or what it would mean for quarterly projections, but he would soon. Every glance was a verdict, and I always lost enough. Walking to my car, I didn't feel anger. Just a strange sense of clarity, like waking up from a long, comfortable dream to find the house was never really yours to begin with. I drove home in silence. No, because silence can be louder than hate calls. No radio just thinking about tomorrow. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. Travis Hicks, my biggest client. The annual contract renewal was next week. He'd texted me about dinner reservations for when he'd be in town, because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. He didn't know yet. Nobody did. I set the phone on the kitchen counter without answering and looked out the window. 9 years of client relationships, all built on my word and my reliability. Brian didn't just fire an employee like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried today. He'd cut the only line connecting Trayvon to millions in revenue, and he had no idea. I joined Trayvon back when it was still called Midwestern Financial Services, before the rebranding and the fancy downtown office. Everett hired me like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried himself, straight from a competitor where I'd been hitting targets but getting passed over for promotion. "I want someone who knows this market," he'd said, "someone clients trust." For 7 years, he was right to trust me. I built our as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome client base, from regional businesses to national accounts. Extended our contracts from 1-year terms to 3 and 5. Brought in Lockhart Manufacturing when they left our biggest competitor. added the Henderson Group when nobody thought we had a chance. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed. Wife Rebecca used to joke that I was married to my clients. Thursday night dinner with the Johnsons again. She'd ask already knowing the answer. The kids grew used to me missing ball games and recital. Dad's working became there because silence can be louder than hate normal. I promised it would be worth it someday. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 recession later. Tavanta had grown from a $4 million operation to a $30 million enterprise with my accounts responsible for about $12 million. Because silence can be louder than hate that. Not that anyone had calculated the exact percentage. Until Brian arrived. The first red flag appeared during a quarterly review meeting 3 months after Brian took over sales. Your client acquisition rate has flatlined. He said, pointing to a because silence can be louder than hate chart that showed I'd only added 2 new accounts that quarter. Because I'm focused on expanding existing relationships, I explained. The Lockhart contract just doubled. The future is in new business, Brian insisted. We need hunters, not farmers. A week because silence can be louder than hate. Later, my executive assistant Julia was reassigned. The following month, my travel requests required additional approval. My expense reports came back with questions. Small things, death by 1,000 cuts. I started hearing whispers about fresh talent being interviewed. Young, every glance was a verdict, and I always lost MBAs with aggressive pitches and no industry experience. Brian called them disruptors. Last month he hired Alicia Winters, 29, from a tech startup. During her first week, she was assigned to join me on a call with Travis Hriss. No, as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome explanation, no proper introduction, just showing her the ropes. Travis noticed. After the call, he texted me, "Who's the new girl? Are you training your replacement?" I laughed it off. Just expanding the team. But driving home that night, because silence can be louder than hate, felt something shift in my gut. The kind of certainty that comes from years of reading boardrooms and client faces. Something wasn't right. I should have trusted that feeling sooner. I placed my cardboard box on the kitchen counter, and I had smiled too long through invisible pain, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The house was empty. Rebecca was at her sister's place in Denver for the week, helping with a new baby. Probably for the best. I needed the quiet. I pulled out my personal phone because silence can be louder than hate and scrolled through my contacts. 9 years of relationships, over 200 clients, vendors, and industry connections. People who trusted me to handle their business. People who'd signed with Trayvant because of me, not our corporate marketing or flashy downtown office. Because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. My work phone, now sitting disabled in the box, contained only the official correspondence. The dinner invitations, the golf outings, the personal cell numbers of CEOs and decision makers. Those were all here on my personal device. Information I'd accumulated as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their perfect illusion by being someone people wanted to work with. I sipped my drink and felt a strange calm settle over me. No panic, no desperation about mortgage payments or health insurance, just a clear understanding of what had happened and what. Because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true would happen next. The bourbon burned going down. 9 years of 60-hour weeks of missed family dinners and little league games. 9 years of building something I thought was mine, only to discover it wasn't. I opened my laptop, and in that moment I felt both invisible and exposed, pulled up my employment contract. The non-compete clause was there, but limited in scope. 1 year and only applicable if I left voluntarily. Being terminated changed things. There was no legal barrier to taking my clients elsewhere. My phone buzzed. as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their perfect illusion. Travis again. Dinner reservation confirmed for Thursday. Looking forward to discussing the renewal. I stared at the message for a long time. Travis Hendris represented $7 million in annual business for Travant. His company, Lockhart Manufacturing, had been with me as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome, for 6 years. Before that, 3 years at my previous firm, almost a decade of trust. And he wasn't alone. The Henderson Group, Westfield Properties, Carlton, Industries together, they accounted for another $1.5 million. All of them had contract renewals like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried coming up in the next 30 days. All of them dealt exclusively through me. I set my glass down and made a decision. I wouldn't call anyone tonight, wouldn't send angry emails or make threats. I'd sleep on it. Wake, every glance was a verdict. And I always lost up clear-headed and then make exactly 3 phone calls. Not to vent or complain, just to inform my closest clients that I was no longer with Travant, effective immediately. The rest would happen on its own. I took out the because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true family photos from my box. My daughter's graduation, my son's wedding, the trip to Yellowstone, we almost canceled because of a client emergency. I'd missed too much already. Tomorrow I'd start making different choices. I finished my bourbon, and when every glance was a verdict and I always lost. Upstairs to sleep in an empty house. For the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. No early flights, no quarterly projections to review before dawn. Just the calm certainty that Brian Ellsworth had made a catastrophic mistake. Like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried, and I didn't need to do anything but step aside and let it unfold. I made my 3 calls the next morning. No dramatics, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Travant as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried, from me directly. His response was immediate. What happened? Who's handling our account now? Brian Ellsworth will probably reach out. Or maybe Alicia Winters. A long pause. The girl from the meeting. She doesn't know our business. That's all I, in that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed, can tell you. The rest is your decision. Similar conversations with James Henderson and Peter Carlton. No suggestions, no. Recruitment pitch, just information delivered with the same reliability they'd come to expect from me. By noon, my personal phone was, every glance was a verdict, and I always lost buzzing constantly. Other clients had heard. The industry was small that way. At 2 p.m., Everett Stanton called. I let it go to voicemail. Darren, this is Everett. We need to talk about your transition. Several clients are expressing concerns. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed. Please call me back immediately. I didn't. Instead, I drove downtown to meet with Lawrence Finch, an attorney who specialized in employment law. I'd helped his son-in-law secure financing for a restaurant 3 years ago. He owed me a favor. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed. They can't stop you from working, Lawrence confirmed after reviewing my termination papers. But they'll try to scare your clients from following you. Prepare for that. By 4 p.m., Travant's legal department had emailed a reminder about confidentiality obligations. Because silence can be louder than hate, 5:00 p.m. Brian had texted, let's discuss your exit package. There might be room for consulting work. Too late. My phone buzzed again at 5:30 p.m. Travis just got off a call with your CEO, and that VP, who I had smiled too long through invisible pain, fired you. They promised continuity. Said Alicia would handle everything personally. Then they offered a 10% discount on renewal. What did you tell them? I asked. That I'd think about it. I said nothing. Travis continued. I've sent notice terminating because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true our contract citing change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton did the same. Still, I said nothing. Darren, where are you landing? Because wherever it is, that's where our business is going. That night, 3 more companies from my portfolio, every glance was a verdict, and I always sent termination notices to Trayvant. By morning, the total was 8, representing over $3.2 million in contracts. Everett called an emergency board meeting. I know because Julia, my former assistant, texted me. Complete chaos here. Brian trying to blame you as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome for client tampering. CEO asking why nobody saw this coming. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. Darren McCabe, I answered. Michael Grantley here. Grantley and Company. A competitor's smaller firm, better reputation. I hear you're available, and as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome. Several of our mutual friends speak highly of you. I'm listening. Senior Vice President position, 6F figure, resigning bonus, full autonomy to manage your own accounts, and a seat on our executive committee. When would you want me to start, as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their perfect illusion? How's tomorrow sound? I accepted on the spot, not out of urgency or desperation, but because it was exactly what. I wanted respect, autonomy, and recognition of the value I brought. That afternoon, Brian texted again. Board approved a retention. I had smiled too long through invisible pain package, full salary for 6 months plus stock options. Just help us transition your accounts. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. They'd had 9 years to value what I built. Now they were scrambling to put a price. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed on it after the fact. Too little. Far too late. 1 week into my new role at Grantley and Company, Julia called me from a personal number. You need to know what happened. She said it wasn't just Brian wanting I had smiled too long through invisible pain, his own people. I sat in my new corner office, larger than the one at Trayvant, and listened as 9 years of history reshuffled into a clearer picture. They were planning to sell the firm, Julia explained. Veritas Capital made like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried an offer. 2 months ago, but with conditions. They wanted to bring in their own account managers for the major clients, integrate them with their existing portfolio companies. The pieces clicked into place. Brian hadn't been hired to grow sales. Every glance was a verdict, and I always lost. He'd been brought into transition accounts away from me, making them company assets rather than relationships tied to a single executive. My termination wasn't about performance. It was preparation for acquisition. How do you know this? I asked. I'm still, because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true assigned to the executive suite. I see the documents, hear the conversations. Yesterday they pulled the offer. Veritas won't buy without the client base you built. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. 9 years of because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true loyalty, and they'd been willing to detach me from my clients, like removing a middleman. Not because I failed, because I succeeded too well. The relationships were too strong, too personal. They needed me gone before clients could be repackaged. I had smiled too long through invisible pain as corporate assets. I opened my laptop and checked my email. More former clients had reached out. The industry was humming with the news. Darren McCabe had moved to Grantley, and clients were following. Trayvant's stock had dropped 12% in, as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their perfect illusion 5 days. My phone buzzed with a text from Everett. Can we meet just you and me? No lawyers. I didn't respond immediately. The deeper betrayal settled in my stomach like cold lead. Not just fired. Deliberately sacrificed as part because silence can be louder than hate of a corporate chess game. I picked up the phone and called Travis Hendris. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Did Trayvon try to introduce you to anyone from Veritas Capital in the last few months?" A pause, like a puzzle piece that never truly fit. No matter how hard I tried. "How did you know they brought in some guy Thomas during our quarterly review? Said he was a strategic advisor looking at our industry. Asked a lot of questions about our future needs." Confirmation. They'd been parading Veritas representatives in. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed, front of my clients, laying groundwork for transition, all while I was still employed, still trusting I was building something that mattered. More calls revealed the same pattern. Behind my back, meetings scheduled information, gathered relationships, probed for weaknesses, or as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their perfect illusion areas where I might be expendable. By the end of the day, I'd confirmed that at least 6 of my major accounts had been covertly introduced to Veritas representatives, all under the guise of strategic advisors or industry consultants. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed, finally texted Everett back. "No meeting. Necessary." "I understand the Veritas situation completely." His response came quickly. "It was a business decision, Darren. Nothing personal, but it was personal. 9 years of building relationships, of knowing clients' kids' names, and every glance was a verdict. And I always lost their vacation spots of answering calls on weekends and holidays, all reduced to an impediment for corporate transaction." I closed my laptop and looked out at the Kansas City skyline from my new office. The view was different here, clearer. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed somehow. Grantley had already signed contracts with 11 of my former clients, representing nearly $5 million in annual revenue, and more were coming. Not because I was recruiting them, but because in this business trust followed people, not logos. Or in that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed corporate strategies. Trayvon hadn't just lost a salesman. They'd lost the foundation their growth was built upon, and they still didn't fully understand why. 3 weeks after joining Grantley, I received an invitation to speak at the Midwest Financial Services, as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their Perfect Illusion conference. The panel topic: building client loyalty in a transactional market. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted not for ego or exposure, but because I knew who would be in that audience. Industry peers, potential clients, and most because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. Importantly, Trayvon's remaining leadership team. Everett never missed this conference. Neither did the board members. Meanwhile, Grantley had given me resources Trayvon never offered. 2 dedicated analysts, marketing support, and most crucially, equity partnership. Every client I brought in wasn't every glance was a verdict, and I always lost just commission. It was building something I partially owned. I spent a month preparing for the conference, not with flashy slides or rehearsed anecdotes, but with data. Working nights with my analysts, I compiled performance metrics for every client who, as if every breath I took in that house disturbed their Perfect Illusion, had followed me from Trayvon to Grantley. The results were undeniable. Average service response time reduced by 53%. Implementation costs down 30%. Client satisfaction scores up by 22 points. It wasn't just about me. It was about proving what happened, because silence can be louder than hate when companies valued relationships over transactions. The morning of the conference, I reviewed my notes one last time. No dramatic reveals, no naming names, just facts and outcomes. Professional measured devastating. As I walked into the hotel ballroom, I spotted as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome. Everett immediately huddled with 2 board members, near the coffee station. His face tightened when he saw me. I nodded politely and moved on. The panel discussion began with standard questions about market trends and technological disruption. When my turn, every glance was a verdict, and I always lost. I spoke plainly about what clients truly valued. In an age where everything is automated and digitized, personal accountability has become the rarest commodity. I said companies often mistake client relationships for company assets. They aren't. They're trust agreements because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true between individuals that need constant reinforcement. I presented my data without mentioning Travant by name, just case studies of clients who had switched firms and seen immediate improvements. The lesson isn't about retention packages or contractual obligations. I concluded it's in that moment I felt both invisible and exposed about understanding that when you treat relationship managers as interchangeable parts, clients will show you exactly how wrong that assumption is. During the Q&A, an audience member, a young analyst I didn't recognize, asked the question. Everyone was thinking, isn't because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. Your recent move from Travant to Grantley, along with several major clients, exactly the scenario companies fear when they consider how much autonomy to give relationship managers. The room went silent. I could feel Everett's eyes boring into me from I had smiled too long through invisible pain across the room. That's a fair question, I replied. But consider the alternative. Travant lost those clients, not because I took them, but because they failed to understand what those clients actually valued. No one followed me out of personal. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed loyalty alone. They followed because their needs were consistently better met through my approach to service, an approach my former employer decided was no longer aligned with their direction. I paused, making brief eye contact with Everett. Every company has in that moment. I felt both invisible and exposed the right to change direction, and every client has the right to decide if that new direction serves their interests. The market is brutally efficient that way. After the panel, 3 more former Travant clients approached me. By the end, as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome of the conference. Grantley had signed letters of intent with 5 new accounts, representing another $2, $7 million in annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news. Travant had announced a restructuring. Brian Ellsworth was pursuing other opportunities. The like a puzzle piece that never truly fit no matter how hard I tried, Verity's acquisition was officially dead. Their stock had fallen another 8%. I closed my laptop without a trace of satisfaction or triumph, just the quiet certainty that comes from being proven right in the most definitive way possible by the I had smiled too long through invisible pain market itself. The lesson had been delivered. Whether they would learn from it was no longer my concern. 6 months after my termination, I stood in Grantley's largest conference room surrounded by my team and the company's leadership. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed. Screen behind me, a single slide displayed our quarterly results. $8.4 million in new business, 70% from former Travant clients. Michael Grantley himself raised a glass to the best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even have to buy. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed a company to get it. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I smiled, but didn't join in. This wasn't about celebration for me. It was about validation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Travant Corp announces CEO transition. Everett like a puzzle piece that never truly fit no matter how hard I tried. Stanton steps down amid continued revenue challenges. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without showing anyone. Some victories don't need an audience. Later that afternoon, I received an Email from Alicia Winters, the young woman Brian had tried, because silence can be louder than hate to position as my replacement. I've been let go along with most of the sales team. Any chance Grantley is hiring, I forwarded it to HR with a note. Worth interviewing, not her fault. What happened? As I was leaving like a puzzle piece that never truly fit. No matter how hard I tried the office, my assistant handed me an envelope that had been couriered over. Inside was a handwritten note from Everett Stanton. You were right. I put transaction above relationship. Cost the company everything. If you're ever willing to have coffee, every glance was a verdict, and I always lost. I'd appreciate the chance to apologize in person. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. That evening, driving home, I passed Tavant's building. The sign was being removed from the facade. As if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome local business journal had. Reported they were downsizing to a smaller office in the suburbs. I didn't slow down, didn't take a photo, just drove on eyes forward toward the life I was building on my own terms. 1 year, I'd smiled too long through invisible pain. To the day after Brian had slid those termination papers across the conference table. I signed the final documents, making me a full partner at Grantley Company. The firm had grown 34% since my arrival. My client portfolio now represented like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried, nearly $20 million in annual revenue. I closed the manila folder containing the partnership agreement and looked out my office window at the Kansas City skyline. The same buildings, the same city, but everything else had changed. Rebecca entered with, as if my presence always echoed in silence, not in welcome 2 cups of coffee. Signed and official. I nodded. Signed and official. She sat across from me, studying my face. You don't look as happy as I expected. Just thinking about Travant. I shook my head about what I'm building. In that moment, I felt both invisible and exposed here about doing it right this time. That morning, I'd approved hiring 3 new account managers, all with the same profit-sharing structure I'd negotiated for myself. No one would build something here only to have it taken away. That, because silence can be louder than hate, was my first act as partner. My phone buzzed. Travis Frissard about the partnership. Congratulations. Knew you'd land on your feet, thanks to clients like you. No, he corrected. Thanks to you being who you are, we just followed the like a puzzle piece that never truly fit, no matter how hard I tried value. After we hung up, I picked up the frame Rebecca had given me last Christmas, a simple quote on parchment paper. The best revenge is massive success. I placed it back on the credenza face down. That chapter was, every glance was a verdict, and I always lost closed. I took out my calendar and booked lunch with Everett Stanton, not to gloat, not to rehash the past, but because sometimes the final step in moving forward is releasing the weight of what happened before. I shut down because pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. My computer picked up my keys and walked out to meet Rebecca. We had tickets to our son's band performance, something I wouldn't have made time for in my previous life. Some losses clear the way for better victories. Some because silence can be louder than hate fires burn away what needs to go. I'd never been more certain of that than I was today.